Hey, Margie here. Did you know that if you're getting enough calcium through food or supplements and you're getting vitamin D, that it's absolutely essential that you also have vitamin K2? And this is what we're going to be talking about today because so many of us are making sure we have our calcium, our vitamin D, and we may be missing this absolutely essential ingredient. Our special guest is Tina Andersson, and Tina's journey into the world of health had a unique start in some unusual turns. She began her career as a trial lawyer and then became in-house counsel for a family pharmaceutical company. But what Tina saw there made her change her direction again. And she turned toward the field of natural health and found her life's work. She channeled her energy into learning all she could about disease prevention and good health maintenance. That led her to discover the importance of gut health and then to other vitamins that were missing in everyday life. Through her company, Just Thrive, she's able to promote gut health, probiotics, K2, and other products. And she shares her passion for wellness, helping others live their best physical and emotional lives. And in today's talk, we're delving into K2, why it's so important, how do we get it, what types. So she answers all our questions, and it's just full of really important information, as well as we talk a little bit about the end about probiotics and what's the benefit of a spore-based probiotic. So lots of amazing information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Tina. I am really, really happy to be here with you today because this topic is so crucial right now. And everyone's on this high dose vitamin D, and it's something people don't even know about. So welcome, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Margie. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking about bone health and the importance of vitamin K2. So I'm excited.
Oh, great. Well, I always love to know the backstory. I always find it's just fascinating because you didn't start in this industry at all. So why
No.
don't you fill us in on how you got to where you are today, where you're, dealing with vitamin K2 and probiotics and, are the CEO of this great company. So why don't you tell us?
Yeah, so it is an interesting journey. I started out as an attorney. I still am an attorney, but I was in litigation for many years, working crazy hours, destroying my health probably because I was working so many hours. And then I decided to start having a family. And then I just did not want to work those crazy hours. I said, you know what, I really need to just focus on having some more work-life balance. So I was able to go to a family pharmaceutical company where I was able to be the general counsel. And so my husband and I were both in the business and we were in this pharmaceutical world and thought it was great because we're like, oh, we're delivering, life-saving medications and we're helping bring health to the world. But after being in the industry for a while, we started to notice a lot of the abuses. We started seeing a lot of the overprescribing of drugs. We recognized that pharmaceuticals are great for like emergency type medicine situations, acute type of situations, but there are, it's not always a place for chronic conditions. And so, and we saw it with our family members. We saw one family member who started on one pharmaceutical, and the next thing you know, she was on 12 different, pharmaceuticals within a year and never really getting better. And so we were like, this is not our life's work. This is not what means anything to us. And we are much more naturally minded anyway. And so we started doing a lot of research, and particularly we were doing research on gut health. And so we were able to, through being at the right place at the right time, one of my husband's colleagues, we were able to get these exclusive rights to these strains of probiotics. And so that's where Just Thrive Health was launched and born. And then while we do focus on gut health, we also are committed to bringing products that are missing and needed in the market. So we're never going to be a supplement company that has 200 different products or SKUs. It's really, we're focusing on bringing products that are missing and needed in the market. And we learned about the ever importance of vitamin K2 and how it is not talked about and, not known about. And yet it is so, so critical. It's such a critical nutrient. And so we launched a very, very incredible vitamin K2 7 product and, went into the research on vitamin K2, which is pretty profound.
Oh, great. And we're gonna talk about that because there's so much, a couple of things you said. I also teach happiness, and I so believe in in being in your mission. And I think that so many people aren't. And so I really commend you when you found out that, it just wasn't in integrity to be doing what you did, that you changed, and now look at all the amazing things you're doing. So it's just a
Thank
nice
you.
story. No, a nice story besides, contributing all this great stuff. It's just nice to know that when you do pivot and do what's in your heart and follow your passion, that positive things happen as a
Yep.
result. So that's really
I
nice.
try to tell everybody that. I'm like, go and follow your passion, because it always falls into place.
It's really true. I have an entire module on passion and purpose in my happiness program, because it does. And you're just a living example of that. So let's delve into K2, because what I see, I'm just going to tell you what I see. I see everybody's getting calcium, and I see people with actually too much calcium because they have some in their food, and then the doctor prescribes calcium and vitamin D. So if people are coming for osteoporosis, and everyone's getting calcium and vitamin D, and now with the pandemic, everybody's taking very high dose vitamin D, which has been proven to help. However, and great for your immunity, but they're missing the K2. So why don't you fill us in on why this is something that's beyond critical?
Yeah, it is so critical. I mean, the job of vitamin K2 is basically to direct calcium from the away from the arteries where we don't want it, like our heart, and into the bone. And the thing, and maybe to back up, we've got vitamin K1, which is, comes from, it's very different than vitamin K2. So vitamin K1 comes from green leafy vegetables like kale, spinach, broccoli, and it basically controls like the blood clotting cascade. And so we're not talking about K1 when you and I are having this conversation, and when we're talking about bone health and heart health. Vitamin K2 is called menaquinone, and it's the form that's produced by the bacteria in your gut. And so, or it's derived like from natto. Have you ever, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of natto, which is the, fermented soybeans that are very yucky tasting, but it's also from fermented cheeses and that kind of a thing. So we are very deficient in vitamin K2. We are very deficient in the Western population, and yet it is so critical, because vitamin K2 is responsible for the carboxylation, or the activation of these vitamin K2 dependent proteins. So so basically, if we back up, like with vitamin D, basically vitamin D stimulates osteoblast cells, and those will release osteocalcin. Osteocalcin is the bone building protein. Really, really, really important that we understand how, like, osteocalcin, because this osteocalcin is being produced, but it's being produced in its inactive form. And osteocalcin requires activation by vitamin K2 to go into its active form. And once that is activated, once the osteocalcin is activated, it's basically like glue. It takes the calcium and sticks it onto the bone. So it's a crucial last step. It's really, really important that we understand that we're taking all of these high doses of vitamin D without K2, then it's using up all the body's K2, and that leads to vitamin K2 deficiency. And it doesn't allow, the activation of the osteocalcin, which is the glue that brings the calcium onto the bone. It's really, really quite important. And there are so many studies that talk about this. When they've done a lot of studies on Eastern and Western Japan. So Eastern Japan tends to eat a lot of natto. And so they have a lower incidence of hip fractures. But when you're talking about Western Japan, where they don't eat the natto, they have a much higher incidence of hip fractures. So it's really, really, I mean, there's so many studies that are talking about. There was a study that showed that half the amount of fracture risk is reduced by the amount of K2 that you have. So it's really, really important that we're getting a lot of K2 in our diet, especially when we're taking high amounts of vitamin D.
It's so interesting, because not only is it taking it, so here we're getting all this massive calcium, all this D, but yet we want to make sure it goes into the bone, just like you said. But also it has the ability to sweep it out of the soft tissues. So it's, there's two functions. It's just incredible.
Yes, that's the part that's so great, is that you know, when you're taking a pharmaceutical, it's like, oh, side effects may include suicide, depression, all these things. I mean, the thing is with vitamin K2, if you go to take it, if you want to start supplementing with vitamin K2, you may take it because you have osteoporosis or you have some type of bone issue, bone density issue. But the side effects include better heart health. I mean, the studies on heart health are profound. There was this massive study done by Rotterdam. It's called the Rotterdam study, and it had 4,800 subjects over a 10-year period. I mean, that is a massive study. And that study showed that just when you were consuming 45 micrograms, just 45 micrograms of K2 daily, it caused a 50% reduction in arterial calcification, a 50% reduction in cardiovascular death, and a 25% reduction in all-cause mortality as compared to those with a low intake of dietary vitamin K2. So, you know, here, and then there's studies on diabetes, there's so many incredible studies on vitamin K2. So you may lead yourself to vitamin K2 because of maybe a bone density issue, or maybe you're leading yourself because of a heart issue. But the side effects are so amazing because they're helping with neurons, with brain health, with, you know, nerve health. All of these things are really attributable to K2, having enough K2. And the problem is we are not getting vitamin K2 in the Western population. We just aren't, unless you're eating, you know, brain and, you know, different kinds of organ meats. The biggest sources in food are organ meats, and then you know, if you look at fermented cheeses that come from Northern Europe, if you're looking at natto, like I mentioned, the fermented soybean, but, you know, most of the Western population are not eating that. So we really, really need to be supplementing with vitamin K2.
You know, it's so unfortunate because natto has over 1,103 micrograms
I know.
per 100 grams of natto. So it's unbelievable. If we just all had natto, we wouldn't need any supplements. But unfortunately, it's slimy. I've had one patient who loved it, who found recipes. Nobody else could stomach it, and it's not as though it's easily available. So it's not a tasty food. I've heard. I mean, people just can't take it. You know, who wants?
I know the way I've heard it described. I'm like, I don't even want to try it.
I know.
No way. I don't even.
I'll take the supplement, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But why don't you explain? Because there's two types, really. And when people are, well, actually, before we do that, I want to tell you something interesting, because I'm glad you mentioned it's not K1, because a lot of people just put them both together, vitamin K. And the thing is with bone, vitamin K1 is important. It's been shown to reduce when people fall. It doesn't improve bone density, but it does improve the collagen matrix and they don't fracture. So K1 is good, but some doctors, when a lot of times I'll give people, tell them what supplements I'd recommend. And I always say, make sure if they have cardiac issues, check with your physician. And they come back and they're like, oh, I can take all these, but absolutely not the vitamin K. And I'm thinking, and they're not on blood thinners either. And I'm thinking, because blood thinning is part of K1, I'm thinking, here, this could help your heart.
I know.
Do you see that too, that there's just people are confused?
Yeah, it's maddening. It's maddening because it's so important for our heart health. But you have to, of course, defer to what a doctor, says, and people are going to listen to the doctor. But you just want to get this information to doctors, to, heart doctors, because this is so critical. This nutrient is so incredibly critical. And I mean, the studies on it are so massive. I mean, there are pharmaceuticals that have those kinds of studies. In fact, statins, are the number one prescribed drug for heart disease. And as statins have been increased, the number of heart disease, the number of people with heart disease has increased in the same amount. So, and in fact, there is a study that came out in 2015 that showed that statins actually could interfere with the production of K2, which is, very counterintuitive. So it's kind of scary.
Why do you think this is, though? I mean, why? I just don't understand. I don't understand it in the osteoporosis world, and I don't understand it in the world of cardiac health. Like, why? I have to say, the doctors are great on talking about calcium, vitamin D, and the vitamin D levels are checked. That everybody does. And even exercise. Maybe they don't tell them exactly what I would say, but still it's known. But yet this, and magnesium is missing too. But why is it that this is missing in both osteoporosis? Do you have any idea?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, it drives me crazy. It's like, it's absolutely driving me crazy. Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't doctors looking into these types of, not therapies, but supplements and nutrients that are really critical? I would love to know, other than that, they're just not being educated on these important nutrients because they are funded by pharma, and pharma doesn't make as much money from vitamin K2, but it doesn't explain the D. Why are they caught onto the D and not the vitamin K2? And my hope is by the work that we're doing, that you and I are doing, and a lot of other people that are talking about K2, that is going to get out there and it is going to become as mainstream as vitamin D.
Yeah, and I just think you're doing a disservice by increasing the D and not also increasing the K2, or even making sure people are getting K2. I
You
just think,
Yeah, you absolutely are. I mean, you are creating more, the more D you're taking without K2 is creating a deficiency in K2 because it's not, the osteocalcin cells are not being activated. I mean, they need the K2 and it's just depleting it. So I
yeah,
agree.
it's crazy. And the thing is, I really do understand that things need to be research based, and nobody can recommend something that there haven't been studies on, or they can't say, oh yeah, it makes sense from a physiological standpoint if there aren't studies. But there are great studies on this. That's
Yes.
what's so confusing to me. I just don't understand it. And hopefully, I mean, that's why I do the work I do as well, to just get the word out there. And these pills are so little and so easy to take
Yes.
that it's sort of a no-brainer to me. And it's not as though it's exorbitantly expensive. There's no reason. I don't understand it, but that's why you're here, and that's why I wanted you here.
And I mean, just to reiterate, I mean, the studies, like I talked about the bone health. I mean, the studies, there's 25 published studies on heart health. I mean, there's all these studies on um, eh, bone health. But I mean, there's also massive studies. There was a Heidelberg cohort study with 12,800 patients over 15 years, showed it reduced the risk of cancers like prostate cancer, breast cancer. I mean, crazy studies. Then there was a study, Tufts University did a study with the USDA, and it showed that vitamin K2 intake could actually significantly reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. I mean, we're talking massive, massive studies out there on vitamin K2. And it's mind blowing that this is not in mainstream medicine. It's mind blowing.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking right now with the pandemic, people are realizing that diabetes, being overweight, all these other conditions are putting people at higher risk. And so I think maybe, just maybe, it's going to, that how important this is. Anything that can be done to reduce these comorbidities, that, so I'm a little optimistic that maybe this is a good time for all this information to get out for people, because people are taking care of themselves. They're concerned. They're scared about their immune system. And so they are taking the D, and they are taking zinc. And we'll talk about that shortly.
Yeah.
But
No,
I just want
I agree. That is the biggest silver lining in this. And there are a lot of silver linings. And I always like to look at the silver linings. So I have seen so many of my friends reach out to me that were like, well, Tina, what do you think I should do here? How much should I take here? And it's so exciting to see people realizing our biggest mission is empowering people. And as I'm sure yours is, just to empower people with health. And now people are feeling empowered. We can't wait for, certain government therapies or pharmaceutical therapies. We need to start taking control of our own health, and I'm hoping that that's what the silver lining in this pandemic will do.
That's so funny that you said that, because there are numerous people who've asked me, what do you recommend? And so I give them my little list. And then afterwards, I've been getting calls like, oh my gosh. Or someone actually even people who had gotten COVID, I recommended certain things. And they're like, what did you recommend? I don't have,
Yeah.
I have terrible IBS and stomach pains, and it was because of a probiotic and something else. What did you recommend? Like all these, they have more energy, like all these great
Yes.
things.
Yes, that's the best part about it. I know people are going to hopefully be healthier. Hopefully.
Yes, I do believe that. And one thing I wanted to add that's just so exciting about, the MK, just about the vitamin K2, is that not only is it, not only the studies about the natto in Japan, that these people didn't have osteoporosis. I mean, there's a huge difference, but also studies that showed that not it could actually reduce bone loss in postmenopausal women, improve bone strength, and even decrease loss of the thoracic spine vertebral height. So they've really done, great things that, to me, it's a disservice to anybody not to be taking K2. And let's talk about the diet in K2 for actually let's before we do that, talk about the two types that most people will be confronted with. There's numerous types, but why don't you talk about like the MK4 versus the MK7?
Yeah, so the two types that you'll normally see are MK4 and MK7, like you said. And MK4 in a supplement form, MK4 comes from like grass-fed meats and grass-fed butter and that type of thing. But in a supplement form, it has a very short half-life. So it's only about, I think, 3.5 hours or something like that. And so MK7 has a 72-hour half-life, so it's going to stay in your body longer. The other big difference is basically if you're taking MK4 is not going to give you MK7, but it's different with MK7. Your body will turn it into MK4 if the body needs it. So really important. And we want to make sure, remember that MK4 is synthetic and MK7 is actually a natural form. So if you find it in supplement form, it will be natural in an MK7.
Oh, great. Because MK4, there have been research showing it reduces fractures. So there's good things in MK4, but you can get it from food as well. Like as you said, the animal products for people who can eat dairy, some of the cheeses, egg yolks, chicken breasts, all of that will be the MK4. It's hard to get, right? The MK7 if you're not eating natto, and the fermented food doesn't have that much in it. Am I right? With the fermented sauerkrauts, it has some, but very little.
Well, the fermented natto, of course, has the MK7.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and then other fermented cheeses would be a source of MK7 also. But yeah, you're not really getting it. But we have to remember that MK7 will convert into MK4. And that's what's really, really critical. If your body needs it, the MK7 will convert it. So there is some debate. People are like, MK4 is better, MK7 is better. It's like the bottom line is that MK7 does convert it into MK4. So it's not even a reason to have the argument about it. So, if people want to take MK4, that's fine. It's just that it's synthetic and we only work with natural ingredients. So that's why we've chosen to only work with the MK7.
You know what? And why don't we go into that? Because I have to tell you, people will just go to the pharmacy and buy, okay, K2. They don't look at what's in it. So being in the industry, why don't you fill us in on why it's so important that you really look at the ingredients and what could be in there in terms of fillers and things that may be counterproductive for people?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head right there, Margie, because it's like basically people will be taking certain supplements. I've seen probiotics that have sugar in them. I'm like, oh my gosh, sugar is the worst thing for your gut. You can't even believe it. Or you find different supplements that have ingredients that, and they maybe don't play nicely together. And so it's really important that you're understanding what the ingredients are. And it's hard out there. I will say, I think it's hard for people because and one of the problems in the supplement industry is that there are companies that aren't always doing things above board. There are so many great companies that are really passionate and they care about the consumer and they care about making a difference in this world. But there are unfortunately some that aren't. And so we have, as a company, have really tried to raise the standard. And that's why we do human clinical trials. We put a lot of our resources toward research and try different human clinical trials. And that's really important. And so we always say, make sure it's been tested in humans, make sure the formulation has been tested in humans. So we know that it's working well. And there could be a study on one ingredient, but do all of these ingredients play nicely together? And so I just think it's important that you understand what the ingredients are. Make sure there's no fillers in there because they can be, like you exactly said, counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And so, well, let's talk about your formulation. First of all, I like the fact you do major testing. You want to just tell us about the testing? Because I don't think people realize that there's certain testing that can be done and give to really make a product so you feel much better about taking it.
Yeah, well, we have an incredible microbiologist on our team who has been working with K2 for years and years and years. 20 years, I'd say, and is really very, very versed on how and has been working with them in the research setting. So when we put our formula together, it was based on what the research had showed us about vitamin K2. And basically we included vitamin K1 in our formulation because if the liver recognizes vitamin K, it may sequester it and not release it to the soft tissue. And so we actually put a little bit of vitamin K1 in there very purposely, so it'll sequester and hold on to the K1 and not the K2. So that was really an important step that is missing in a lot of vitamin K2 supplement products, and a very important step, because if you don't have the K1, there's a very strong possibility that the liver will hold on to the vitamin K2. So we also included zinc and magnesium in our formulation. Those are two of the main cofactors of vitamin K2. They play, a huge role in a lot of the vitamin K2 reactions. And we made sure that there was an adequate amount of magnesium and zinc to make sure you're able to utilize the K2. So it's like, we called it like the super absorption complex, because having these ingredients in there, the magnesium and the zinc and then the K1 makes this a very absorbable form of vitamin K2. And then we went ahead and tested it. This is actually a pharmaceutical grade form of vitamin K2. And the significance of that is that it has gone through rigorous testing to make sure that it is stable. A lot of times vitamin K2 is a very active compound, tends to degrade over time on the store shelf. And so these have actually been tested. This form of vitamin K2 has been tested in a pharmaceutical setting to make sure that it will remain completely stable through the expiration date on the label.
Well, I really love that. I mean, a couple of great things is that zinc is so important for our bones. It's critical for the collagen matrix. It's just a very important ingredient, as well as they've found that zinc is something everybody's taking now to keep themselves well in their immune system. So the fact that it includes zinc, number one, and number two, magnesium is essential. That's another ingredient that we need for our bone health. So it's funny because prior to once I learned about Just Thrive, I always try everything before. And what I love about it, and my husband is so grateful to your company, because prior to this, again, certain things interact. So I had things separated so that they didn't interact. But once we took your pills, goodbye zinc, goodbye the magnesium. So it really cut down. And that's, I think, a problem. So many people say, I can't take all these pills. I just can't. And so yours has a lot of things in one. And I think it's really great. And also yours has more K2. Can you tell us about that? Why you have, because yours has 320, is that correct?
Yes, ours has 320 micrograms, and that was done very intentionally and based on all of the latest research showing that we need high doses of vitamin K2 to really even make more of a change. And there's actually no LD50 for vitamin K2, which LD50 is the lethal dosage, and there is no known LD50 for vitamin K2. So it's not like, even though it's a fat soluble vitamin, people have a hard time grasping this, but it's a fat soluble vitamin like vitamin D. Too much vitamin D can lead to vitamin D toxicity, especially if you're not taking vitamin K2 along with it. But vitamin K2 does not have any known toxicity. So, but in contrast, there are so many studies showing about how important high levels of vitamin K2. So the 320 micrograms seems to be more of the therapeutic dosage for vitamin K2.
That's incredible, though. How nice that you can't overdose on it.
Right. It's really, really nice. And that's one of the reasons we didn't put vitamin D in our formula, because we didn't know people are taking lots of vitamin D right now. They're getting a lot of vitamin D from different foods that are fortified with vitamin D. And so we really thought long and hard about this. And believe me, we get a lot of, customer like, why didn't you put vitamin D? But why didn't you put vitamin D? We don't want any of our products to ever lead to anything that could be detrimental. So, you take control of your vitamin D, but take the K2 along with it.
Oh, that's so interesting. And your K2, it's called Menaquin Gold. Is there anything special about that type?
Megaquin Gold.
Megaquin, okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's the biggest thing is that it's this prescription grade source of vitamin K2, and it was actually created for the pharmaceutical market. And It's produced also through the fermentation of bacillus spores and the same that are found in natto. And so it's just a very, very, high degree of stability, quality, safety, all be, guaranteed with this form of this megaquin gold.
Wow, so very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's just talk before we move on from this, but because we could talk about this, but I do want to ask you a few other things. But it goes way back. I think that could you talk a little bit about Weston A. Price's work? Because I find it fascinating that it didn't just appear K2. It's been around, just wasn't called vitamin K2.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Here's this dentist, years and years and years ago, who discovered that there were certain populations in the world that had no jaw issues. They had enough room in their mouth for all their teeth, and then but why in America it wasn't like that? Why in the Western population? And he called it Activator X. Activator X was this nutrient that was that we as a population were deficient in, but there were all of these other populations out there in the world that were not deficient in it. And they found that it later came to discover that Activator X, which is what Dr. Weston A. Price referred to it as, was actually vitamin K27. So really, really incredible work that he did back then. So that's why it's so important for, your jaw structure. It's so important for your jaw structure. I always say it's so great for kids. I know my kids were always on it, and now they're adults, but they were on it even, when my son was like 11, 12, 13, just because he's growing really fast. And I, was hoping, and so far, knock on wood, my daughters have not had to have their wisdom teeth pulled yet. So that's really incredible. So.
Oh, can you imagine if indeed, because I didn't know about any of this when my kids were small, and now they're all grown, and so they've all been in major braces, and they all had wisdom teeth pulled, and,
Yeah.
and as well as I did as well, have wisdom teeth pulled. But can you imagine? It'll be so interesting if we see that people who start on K2 early in life, if like Weston Price found, it'll change. I mean, it's so.
I know. I wish I had done a more scientific study. I wish they started even younger. So maybe I'll have my cousin who has a young child, maybe get her on it and see what happens if she needs to have her wisdom teeth. It'll be a long-term study.
So you're really recommending that kids take this as well?
Yeah, because it's great for bone strength and building your bones, and they're a lot of them are getting vitamin D fortified foods. They're getting vitamin D anyway, so they need to make sure they're getting vitamin D from the sun, which is important. So we just want to make sure that kids, for sure, bone health, all neurons and your brain health, all of those things are really important for kids too.
Is this supplement the right dose for kids? Is it okay with the zinc and everything else? That's fine for the kids?
Yeah. You could, sometimes, like, especially if they're younger, we would do like maybe one capsule. Our dosage it's 320 micrograms, like we talked about, but it's one capsule twice a day. And so you could maybe just give the kids one capsule just to get them some vitamin D in their systems.
And can they take it? Because kids don't love. Can we pour it on their food?
Yep, that would be no problem. That would be no problem.
And adults too. If you don't want to take another pill, right? Just open it up.
Absolutely. A lot of adults don't like to swallow.
Oh yeah. Well, these aren't big pills though. That's the good part. So many pills are just so tremendous these days.
These are easy to take.
And so, what's your recommendation in terms of with food, twice a day? What would be if you had to make suggestions?
Because they're a fat soluble vitamin, we recommend taking it with a high fat meal. So, and when you're having avocado or some type of high fat meal, just take it with food. It works better with the food.
Okay. Isn't there anything that counteracts it, that they shouldn't take it at the same time that they're taking?
No, not in terms of food. No.
Or what about other supplements? Is there anything that they should be concerned about?
Not at all. The only thing, like we talked about, we have to put on our label the K, because the K1 is in there, and that is, acts as a blood thinner. And so people who are on any type of blood thinner, they would need to talk to their doctor about that. But that would go with any supplement anyway.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, but that's so interesting with the kids. I just wonder what's going to happen.
I know. Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh my gosh, how great. I mean, I feel bad for the oral surgeon have all the business, but
the funny thing is that with also with bones, I mean, this is one of my missions, is to let people know that bone health starts from childhood. It's like a bank where you're building bone. And I believe that if we care about our bone health way back when we're building bone and throughout life, that we're not going to have osteoporosis later on. The more bone we build when we're younger, it affects what happens later on. So just think about this. If the kids are taking the K2, they're doing the exercise, if it could all really, really impact. So everything you're hearing, pass down to your kids, your grandchildren, because it's just so very, very important.
Even if they took it a couple times a week, maybe they took one capsule. I mean, it's just important to get those really critical, essential nutrients into their bodies.
Yeah, so it's something we really need to educate the pediatricians on, how important this is for people.
Or give them liver. I mean, it's either one. Maybe give them a choice. Do you want to give them liver or do you want to give them this supplement? So,
or what about natto, the slimy natto? You take this, or we'll pour this on your food.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, before we go, I just have to talk to you a little bit about probiotics, because your company makes a fabulous probiotic. So why don't you just tell us, because it's a spore-based probiotic, and it, just maybe explain. But before we do that, I just believe that our gut, and I think anyone that's been listening to the podcast knows how important our gut is for osteoporosis. And this is something I see all the time, that, people have issues with their bones, but yet they don't address their gut. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your probiotic and why the importance of spore-based probiotic?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I could not agree with you more. I mean, everything starts in the gut. It is so important that when you're on any type of health journey, that you start in your gut. Even, like you said, osteoporosis. I mean, you may be taking supplements like K2 and different supplements, but if your gut is inflamed, it's not absorbing all those nutrients. It's not absorbing the nutrients that from food. You're eating this healthy, clean diet, but if your gut is not, if it's inflamed, it's not absorbing these nutrients. So it's really important that we do focus on that. So we are very, very passionate here about gut health. We're very, very passionate about gut health. And we launched a spore-based probiotic. The biggest difference between a spore-based probiotic and the majority of other probiotics on the market is its ability to get to the intestines alive. So spore-based probiotics have this endospore shell around themselves, and it has the ability, this shell around itself allows it to get through the gastric system 100% alive, and then get to the intestines 100% alive. So basically, most probiotics will die in the gastric system. The gastric system is very acidic. It's very hostile. It's known as the gastric barrier. Most probiotic strains die in the stomach and never make it to the intestines alive. So essentially, when you're taking most probiotics, you will give dead bacterial therapy, and they may do something. They may give you some symptomatic type of relief, but with spores, they get there and they actually are able to change the makeup of the microbiome. So it's a very, very effective approach. Spore-based probiotics, like I said, have this endospore shell. It's like a hardy shell, and it's not something that we've enteric-coated or engineered. This is the way we found these strains in nature, with this shell around themselves. So they're dormant when our ancestors found them in the soil. They may eat off the land. They ate like roots and tubers off the land, and they would get some of these spore-based probiotics from the soil. And then when they were in the soil, they were dormant. They had this shell around themselves. So now you swallow them, they're dormant. They get into the stomach, they're dormant. It's not till they hit the intestines that they take their shell off. And that's when they go into their live vegetative cell state. And then when they get there, this is what's really incredible. They don't just pass through and, maybe make it a little bit better. They actually read the microbial environment. So they're reading the environment, like looking at where are there pathogenic bacteria and how do I address those? Where are the good bacteria that we want to help bring back to life and kind of, help thrive through the intestinal tract. So really, really effective approach to gut health. And the studies are incredible. We have a human double-blind leaky gut study on really incredible results showing that it's really helping strengthening the gut barrier. So they're really, really a unique and effective form of probiotics.
Oh, great. That's that's really terrific. And the other thing, this I think is so important, because when you take antibiotics, and it's funny, my husband is an OBGYN, and so I hear him on the phone all the time. And there are certain conditions where you need antibiotics, and he's prescribing them. And I'm like, he makes sure the person has a probiotic. Now he does. Now he's got that in his head that you cannot prescribe an antibiotic. But tell us about yours, because yours has some really great properties that you've actually tested with antibiotics. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we tested these bacillus strains of probiotics that are found in Just Thrive in some of the strongest antibiotics out there. These were patients that had liver encephalitis. They were on the strongest antibiotics out there, and found that the spores survived 100%. They were able to survive the presence of an antibiotic, and that is massive. Most probiotics, just like they would die in the stomach, even if they get to the intestines, they would be killed for sure by the presence of an antibiotic, where the spores have the ability to survive the presence of an antibiotic. So absolutely, antibiotics are detrimental to your gut health. Of course, antibiotics save lives, and oftentimes they need to be prescribed for the right reasons. Although the CDC does say that 50% of antibiotics were probably prescribed unnecessarily. But nonetheless, if you have to take an antibiotic because of something going on, make sure you're taking a spore-based probiotic. It's really, really important, because these antibiotics really are detrimental to our health. Or to our gut health. And there was studies that show that a single course of clindamycin actually wreaked havoc on the gut for a year after. Some studies were up to a year and a half after. So really, the people will be like, oh, I'm just taking this one course, I'll be fine, I'll take some probiotics. But you need to really take the probiotic along with an antibiotic if you're taking it. And it should be a spore-based, because they have the ability to survive the presence of an antibiotic.
So I have to make sure he tells people spore-based.
Yes.
There's not that many out there, really.
No,
So.
no. We were definitely disruptors in the market. We came, and it was hard. It was a hard battle, but we don't care. It was the best thing that we've ever done.
Oh, that's great. And how, if you're taking the antibiotic, what's your recommendation? How many hours do you say? What's your suggestion?
Great question. Yeah. So our normal dose for Just Thrive is 1 capsule a day when you're taking, just to take it, just for our overall health and gut health. When you're on an antibiotic, we suggest taking 2, and we suggest taking 2 at the same time. Not at the same time as your antibiotic, but at the same time as each other. So not splitting the dose apart from different times of the day. So, and then, theoretically you could take them at the same time, but just to be safe, we always say take the probiotic maybe a few hours before the antibiotic.
Oh, that's great. So in terms of finding Just Thrive, and I know you've been so kind to give our listeners, they're going to get a discount if they use Just Happy, right? That's the coupon. They're just right, Happy. That's easy to remember. So can they also find it though? So can they find it other places as well?
Yeah. So the best place to find it would be at justthrivehealth.com. And then, you could use the coupon Happy and get a 15% off discount. So, and our customer service team is amazing. If anyone has any questions or want to ask about it, we have a health coach on there if they have any questions. So, but it's super easy to take, and just justthrivehealth.com.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I'm telling you, as I said, I only recommend things that I try. And I've loved this because it's small, it's easy to take. And, I research each thing. The zinc is the very most absorbable type of zinc, each thing, the magnesium. So you really, I was very impressed how you put this together with the K2. And I thought that, I thought you did a great job, and it's easy to take. And look at all the benefits. So if anyone is not on K2, get on K2, because I think everything will, there's just no reason not to be. And the health benefits are incredible, especially for your bones. I know a lot of people listening we're so concerned about our bones. And if you're not on this, you're missing such an important piece. So
yeah, my gosh, if you have bone issues, you definitely want to be taking K2.
And even just as you said, the kids and growing up, even if you don't, we want to do things so that we have strong bones throughout our life.
Right. And I always encourage people to get their nutrients from food. Of course, the problem is we're just not getting vitamin K2 from food. Again, if you'd rather take natto or liver or whatever, but in this case, you just aren't getting it from food.
Okay, great. Is there any last minute things you want? We could talk about. We could spend a whole entire hour on the probiotic, but I just wanted to tell people about that because I think a lot of people don't realize the difference. And I thought that, especially when people are on antibiotics, how critical this is.
Yeah. So the only other thing I would say is just that take baby steps. I mean, the fact that somebody's listening to your podcast is a huge baby step in their journey to health. And I think when we're all trying to do our journeys to health, we're always trying to take these massive steps. So just start taking baby steps. Maybe start introducing, either a nutrient, the vitamin that you want to take, or adding different foods that are high in certain nutrients that you think are beneficial for you. But just, be easy on yourself, take baby steps, and applaud those baby steps when you take them. And I just, even somebody that's listening today is so great that they're taking this first little step and their journey to health.
Oh, well, thank you. I so agree with you. And the last thing you want to do, I couldn't agree more, is you don't want to be overwhelmed because, oh my gosh, I have to get K2. That,
Right.
the stress involved with that is not worth it. So I couldn't agree more about the baby steps. And that's a great way to sum it up. So thank you. This has been just incredible. And it's really been a pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing, because just going into the industry, making a difference, giving us such safe, great supplements is just, you're doing your passion, plus you're helping humanity.
Yeah. Thank you, Margie. You're doing the same thing. I appreciate platforms like yours, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Tina as much as I have, and now have a better understanding of K2 and why it's so absolutely essential we make sure that we're getting this very important vitamin. All the links that Tina talked about to Just Thrive will be in the show notes. And make sure to use the coupon code HAPPY, and you will then receive 15% off anything that you purchase. So bye for now, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.